Chapter 1. Drip. 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 Water from the ceiling of the cave continued to fall at a constant pace. Not too fast, but not slow either. The room was dimly lit by multiple torches hanging on the sides of the wall. Multiple large cylindrical containers filled with liquid were erected in the room and gave off a light blue glow. In one of the containers the fingers of a specimen slightly moved. Ah! What happened? Where am I? Am I not dead? I took a minute to slowly assimilate my mind and recollect my thoughts since all I could see was darkness. The last thing I remembered was being shot in the chest and then pressing a button that triggered an explosion. Oh wait. Right, I was on a search and destroy mission. I worked as an international spy for the UN and was supposed to infiltrate and recover or destroy the new weapon of one of the most dangerous terrorist organizations in the world. The day before I was about to complete my mission, someone leaked the info of my mission to the enemy, so I had to work in haste. I ended up getting shot in the process, but I was able to successfully transmit the data of their weaponized research to the UN. Since I was dying and had no way to escape, I ended up destroying the entire research base with the multiple explosives I planted. I should have died then and there, but turns out I'm alive. Is this what they call reincarnation? I slowly opened my eyes and took in my surroundings. Seems I'm in some sort of experimental container, I mused as I checked over the multiple needles and pads attached to my new body. Wow, my hands are pretty pale looking. Wait, does this mean my entire body is this pale? Geez, almost like a ghost. I have a feeling that if I stick around here I'll be in for a world of torture. Seems like the other containers are empty. And my hands and feet are pretty small. Did I reincarnate into the body of a child? As I was musing to myself, I heard footsteps coming from the hallway corridor, so I quickly resumed my dead-like comatose state. Surprisingly, even with my eyes closed I seemed to be able to tell where the mysterious figure was and track its movements. In my mind the figure looked like a blue light of fire. The footsteps slowly got louder and louder until they came to a stop in front of the container I was in. I wonder who it is, I silently pondered. Probably the person who put me in this damn jar. What I wasn't expecting was that the voice of this mysterious individual sounded incredibly eerie and sinister. Another failure. It said. Looks like I'll have to leave this hideout before I'm discovered. What a pity. Other than that kid Yamato, every other experimental subject died in the process of creating a wood-style user. I even went to the lengths of giving this one the Sharingan and tortured its mind in hopes to unleash the Mangekyo Sharingan. Unfortunately both the body and the mind couldn't stand the process and ended up shutting down. I silently cursed in my head at this vicious bastard and was also surprised at myself that I understood what he was saying. After a while of this mysterious figure taking a few important documents, he left without saying another word. I remained unmoved for a few hours just in case before opening my eyes again and taking a sweep around the room with my eyes. Surprisingly, everything in the room, even while being dimly lit, was perfectly clear to me. Oh wait. That person did say he gave this body Sharingan. No way, don't tell me I reincarnated into the world of Naruto. And that person. No way, could that have been Orochimaru? I was reincarnated into the body of one of his experimental subjects. I unplugged the pads and needles attached to my body and took off my breathing mask before swimming to the top of the container and removing the lid to climb out. I gave my body a quick stretch and took in a deep breath before looking at my naked reflection through the glass container. Wow. Pale, I mused to myself. And definitely male. Surprisingly, I'm not genderless as one of Orochimaru's experiments. I ran my hand through my snow-white hair, which was surprisingly soft. From the looks of my appearance, I'm probably around age 4 or 5. I stared fixedly at my eyes, which bore the blood-red color of the Sharingan and the trademark 3-tomo pattern on them. I focused in an attempt to deactivate the Sharingan, which failed miserably. Guess I can't deactivate the Sharingan since my body isn't that of the Uchiha. I focused on my body and sensed the changes of energy flow through it. This energy must be chakra. Surprisingly, the drain on my chakra was minimal. Must have something to do with what Orochimaru did to this body. My guess is that this was an artificial body made from the first Hokage's cells. For an artificial body, I'm surprisingly handsome compared to the experimental subjects I saw in the anime and manga of my past life. Thankfully, I don't look like White Zetsu. I wonder which timeline of the Narutoverse I was reincarnated in. Since Orochimaru mentioned recreating wood style and Sharingan implantation, I'm guessing before the Fourth Great World War and possibly after the Third Great World War. And since I have the Sharingan, the Uchiha clan massacre must have occurred already. I walked around the room and found some drapes and cloth which I used to create some makeshift clothes to wear. I sat down on the ground looking through the memories contained in this body before a quick and sharp pain pierced my mind and my eyes. Evidently, the previous owner of this experimental body had consciousness, and so the experiences it went through and kept as memories came rushing at me all at once. From the moment it was born to the inhumane torture it suffered, all of it filled my mind in one go as I let out an agonizing scream of pain. Ah! I clutched my eyes as blood ran down them and squirmed on the floor. This went on for a few hours before I lost consciousness. When I finally woke up, I took a deep breath and steadied my heart and my mind. That was awful. I only wanted to organize the memories of this body, but it suffered so much pain and torment that it built up a wall in the back of its mind to keep the pain at bay. Once I tried to pry open that wall in my subconscious, all that pain came back at once. I turned to look at my reflection once more and noticed the change in my eyes. Red eyes with 6 tomo on the outside, and instead of a black pupil in the center, it was a swirl of darkness akin to that of a black hole. Mangekyo Sharingan. So, Orochimaru made this body go through all that pain and torture both physically and mentally in order for this body to awaken the Mangekyo. However, he failed to notice that this body awakened the Mangekyo just prior to its death. According to the memories of this body, Orochimaru put in a lot of time and effort creating and nurturing it aside from torturing it. Apparently this body is very good at assimilating other bloodlines and was a branch subject for his research on Uchiha Shin. If I remember correctly, Uchiha Shin was a character in the spin-off manga in the Boruto series after Naruto ended. He was an experimental subject used for creating a method to utilize multiple Sharingan, and later Orochimaru used Shin's Sharingan-filled arm to fuse it with Danzo. Shin later escaped and ran off into some other dimension with his clones. Guess he won't be making an appearance anytime soon. Getting up off the floor, I walked around the room one more time according to the memories this body studied of Orochimaru's movements. Pushing behind some of the rocks on the walls, I found a box. Aha! Orochimaru probably thought this was useless to him and left it. I carefully opened the box to find some scrolls inside and then opened and studied the contents contained within. Oh, this has some various sealing techniques. And this one contains some information on low-level D-rank ninjutsu, even some C-rank ninjutsu and taijutsu. Oh, the substitution jutsu will be useful. Body Flicker Jutsu, Earth-style Headhunter Jutsu, Leaf Whirlwind, Shadow Shuriken, Fire-style Flame Bullet, and a few others. Looks like Orochimaru collected some various jutsu that seem to be miscellaneous for him, but for me this is a golden opportunity. I sat down and carefully memorized the details of all the jutsu before creating a makeshift bag out of some rags and bundling my feet in some cloth as temporary protection for my feet. I cut a black cloth into a blindfold, and utilizing one of the sealing techniques I just learned, I imprinted a one-way visual sealing technique on the blindfold before tying it around my eyes. The drain on my chakra wasn't too bad after using the one-way concealing seal jutsu. I wonder how my chakra reserves are compared to others. Considering this body is only 4 or 5 years old, my guess is the chakra I have access to isn't a small number. If I'm right and the Uchiha massacre happened already, and given the fact that I am not of the Uchiha clan, me possessing the Sharingan is way too high profile. I'd most likely get hunted down by other shinobi. With my Sharingan I can see through the blindfold just fine, and with the one-way concealing seal jutsu it'll prevent others from seeing through the blindfold and detecting my eyes as long as the blindfold doesn't come off. I walked to the box I opened earlier and took out a map to study it. Looks like I'm near Kurigakure, the land of water. According to some of the documents I found lying around this hideout, it seems that I was reincarnated about 5 years after the Kyuubi's attack on the Leaf Village. That should also mean that Sasuke and Naruto are about 5 years old right now. I have a chance given that I'm already near Kurigakure. If I time it right and move fast enough I could potentially save Haku and Kimimaro. Since I know Sasuke, Sakura, and Naruto are probably going to be on a team, what if I can save Haku and Kimimaro and form our own team? I know Kimimaro will suffer from an illness, but that won't be until the later years, and Konoha should have the medical equipment to keep him stable for a while until Tsunade arrives. Good thing Orochimaru had a detailed map here. Since I can sense chakra and people's presences from far away, I must be a sensor type, so that'll make things easier. Alright, I'm finally ready to get out of this damn cave. Chapter 2. Whoosh. The wind breezed past my face as I continued to run through the forest at a leisurely pace. I took a piece of bread from my knapsack and stuffed it into my mouth with appreciation. Thankfully those bandits I saw earlier were pretty stupid as I thought back to what happened a few days ago. Flashback a few days ago. You idiot, I told you to double-check the information. Those merchants obviously aren't going to come down this way or they would have crossed our paths yesterday. Alright, calm down Jugo. No need to yell so furiously at Kanwai. Sen, you're too soft of Kanwai. Jugo said. Kanwai gave an embarrassed glance at Jugo and Sen before turning his head away in shame. Sen simply sighed and then said, well, no use fussing about it now. Let's go and gather some intel in the nearby town Jugo. Kanwai, you stay here and watch our stuff. We'll be back in a few days. Kanwai simply gave a nod before lowering his gaze once more. Jugo shook his head, and soon after the man called Sen and Jugo both ran off towards the town they spoke of earlier. I simply stayed hidden in a nearby bush, remaining as still as possible and controlled my breathing to be as shallow as possible, not giving a chance to expose my presence. Thankfully it didn't seem like any of them were a sensor-type ninja. Well, given that they failed to track the merchant group they wanted to rob, gave me assurance that they probably wouldn't find me so long as I didn't make any sudden movements. I was resting nearby when I sensed 3 different chakra signatures approach, so I had quietly made my way over to observe. Through my Sharingan and sensory skills I easily determined that this guy named Kanwai was the weakest of the 3. Since they're bandits I won't feel that bad stealing from them, but should I go in guns blazing or wait for a better chance? I'll wait and see what this Kanwai guy does first. Maybe he'll do something stupid like leave the campsite. Wow, I mused to myself. Speak of the devil, this guy really is leaving the campsite. I can't believe I got duped and got false information. Kanwai mumbled to himself. Gotta take a leak, he silently thought. He stood up and started walking away from the campsite to a nearby tree. Hey, leaving your back exposed to me with your guard visibly down, luck is on my side. Earth-style headhunter jutsu. I placed my hands on the ground and sunk into it. Not a moment later my hands reached up and dragged Kanwai down to the ground by his ankles until only his head was above ground. He shrieked at the sudden attack. Who the hell is it? Kanwai panicked and yelled. He tried turning his head but to no avail. I slowly walked up in front of him so he could see me. Who are you? What do you want? He said. As I walked closer out from the shadow of the trees and into the light I simply gave him a smile. What the hell? A kid. Kanwai calmed down and started laughing. Ha 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 ha. Boy, do you have any idea who I am? Better run before I. Before he could finish his sentence his body shuddered everywhere and beads of sweat started falling from his forehead. The reason? It was because before he could finish his sentence, the kid in front of him took off his blindfold and revealed demonic-looking eyes. The legendary eyes that many ninja in the shinobi world dreaded facing on the battlefield. Those blood-colored black patterned deadly-looking eyes. The Sharingan. How? Why you? At this point Kanwai couldn't form a coherent sentence. I stopped walking once I was close enough to him and then knelt down in front of him as I stared straight into his eyes. Don't worry, it'll all be over soon, I said. Utilizing the power of the Sharingan, I cast a genjutsu on Kanwai and sifted through his memories. He may have been a coward, but that didn't excuse his disgusting personality and horrific deeds, robbing anyone from children to elderly. Killing innocents too weak to defend themselves and raping defenseless women. I snarled in disgust. I walked over to their campsite and found some ninja tools, took out a kunai and slit Kanwai's throat, effectively killing him. Whether in this world or my previous world, there's always scum like them that exist. The world is better without them, I silently thought to myself. I put my blindfold back on and I raided their campsite before leaving and ensuring my tracks were erased so the other two bandits couldn't investigate. End of flashback. Unfortunately, they didn't have any clothes suitable for kids my size. I sighed to myself as I looked down at my raggedy getup. Oh well, there's no helping it. I got some money and ninja tools, so I should be able to buy some clothes in town. I'll also need to exchange this knapsack when I have the chance, just in case I bump into those other two bandits and they recognize it. It's already been a few days since that incident, and the time interval between those two bandits, Jugo and Sen, leaving for the town wasn't that long before I raided their camp and left for the same town. I continued on my way, and not long after the town came into view. I slowed down my pace and walked through the town. The weather was dark and cloudy and a cool wind was blowing today. The town itself looked dark and unhappy. There were plenty of children in rags and old beggars on the streets, so I suppose I didn't really stand out that much. I silently looked around for a clothing shop and quickly located one near the corner by an alley. I walked in and bought some normal-looking clothes and shoes and a new knapsack. Thankfully, the bandits I raided from had enough money to exchange for these stuff, with even some extra ryo for food and lodging. I walked up to a food stand and bought a meat skewer to enjoy while scoping out the state of the town and listening in on people's conversations in hopes to gather some useful intel. Thankfully, the heavens are on my side. I overheard a conversation about a tragedy that occurred not too long ago, about an incident in a village north of here where a group of people attempted to kill a woman and child due to them finding out they had the ability to manipulate water, but in the end the child ended up killing everyone in pursuit of him. This was exactly what happened to Haku. I immediately set out northbound toward that village. It would take me at least a week to get there. Cross my fingers that Zabuza hasn't gotten there first. I ran as fast as I could, taking as minimal rest for food and sleep as possible, allowing me to get there in 5 days. I slowly walked through the snow as I let out a cold breath of air. I draped the pelt of a gray wolf I killed on the way here over my body. It's definitely colder here, I thought silently as I walked into the town. I closed my eyes through the blindfold and sensed all the surrounding people in the small village. I slowly filtered out any adult signatures I was picking up on and focused only on the children. If I want to find Haku quickly, then focusing on looking for a kid's signature and strong chakra should quickly narrow the search. In the dark recesses of my mind, dark blurry outlines represented people with no chakra and blue flames represented those with chakra. The larger and denser the flame, the more powerful the person was. It wasn't long after that hundreds turned into a few 20s and a few 20s turned to 10s, then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That one. That's got to be Haku. I walked up to a food stand and bought a nice and hot meat skewer first. Okay, now how to approach? Naturally, I guess. Oh, whatever, I'll wing it. I walked over to where I sensed the chakra signature was from earlier and turned into an alleyway. There I saw a lone and ragged child fighting off some dogs over a scrap of meat. I kept a cool-looking expression, but inside my heartbeat quickened slightly. Holy crap, it's really Haku. I found him. I was internally elated. Haku was currently fighting off the two wild dogs barehanded while guarding the piece of meat on the ground. I decided this is where I should step in, so I reached in my knapsack and threw 2 kunai at the wild dogs. Even though I didn't get to train a lot yet in this life, my previous memories as a spy had experience throwing knives, and having the Sharingan makes it even easier. Both kunai hit their marks perfectly, sinking deep into the nape of the skinny dogs' necks. They both let out a whimper before collapsing, dead on the ground. Haku finally took notice of my presence and stared at me blankly with eyes that looked as if he were dead. His eyes devoid of purpose and life. As he was about to grab the piece of meat on the ground, I stepped forward and said, "Wait." He paused momentarily and turned to face me. In my previous life I too had the same kind of expression in my eyes. One filled with no purpose. One filled with void. Looking at Haku's expression brought back my painful memories of my past life. I too had no parents, abandoned and left for dead. I had to fight for my own survival. Whether in this life or my past life, there too exists kids like Haku. Just seeing his pained expression reminded me of my own, and because I know what that pain felt like, I didn't want him to wallow in the darkness. Haku continued to stare blankly at me with those eyes devoid of emotion until I finally held out the meat skewer in my hand. "Here. Don't eat the one on the ground. You can have this one." He flinched slightly and held out his hands to grab the skewer. He hesitated at first, but then grabbed it and held onto it. He didn't eat it, nor did he do anything with it. He simply held it. For the first time he took in the full picture of this stranger in front of him who offered him fresh food. A kid who looked no older than himself, and who seemed to be blind with the black blindfold around his eyes. And with the softest and almost inaudible voice, he spoke, "Why?" I stared at him silently for a moment before answering, "I don't know. I just felt like we were similar." He continued to stare at me for what seemed like hours, when in reality it was more like a few seconds. Then a drop of tears poured down his cheek, followed by 2 and 3, and soon after tears were streaming down his face. He didn't wail or weep, he simply stood there with tears flowing down his face. I looked on and flinched when the tears started coming down his face. But what caught me off guard was that I hadn't realized that not long after Haku began crying, tears rolled off of my own cheeks. Even though you couldn't see my eyes due to the blindfold, the tears rolled onwards. It was like we were both staring at a mirror in that moment. Honestly, it was a strange situation to be in. 2 kids the age of 4 standing in the middle of an abandoned alleyway near 2 dead dogs, with one kid holding a meat skewer and both kids having tears streaming down their faces without even weeping or making a noise. Anyone who saw this scene would definitely be confused. I quickly returned to my senses and used my sleeve to wipe away the tears from my face, then said, "Hurry up and eat before the meat turns frozen." He simply nodded and wolfed down the meat skewer he held in one hand while using his other hand to wipe away his tears. I gave a small smile in satisfaction. He threw away the emptied skewer before saying, "What do I do now?" I took off my wolf pelt and draped it over him, which surprised Haku since he finally showed me a surprised expression instead of an emotionless one. Inwardly I sighed a relief that Haku could show an emotion other than nothingness. "What do you do?" How about you travel with me? You and I are brothers now, deal?" I said as I held out my hand towards him. Haku stared at me with slight disbelief before giving a faint smile that showed how broken he was emotionally inside, yet not totally broken. He grabbed my hand and said, "Deal. I'm Izaya. Karasuma Izaya. What about you?" "I'm Haku. Yuki Haku." Chapter 3. It's been a year since Haku and I have teamed up together, and we've been traveling around the land of water gathering information and materials for training when and wherever we can. With the spare money I had from last time we were able to get Haku a new set of clothes, and with how unruly and unstable the land of mist is, robbing a few highway bandits and thugs didn't make us feel the least bit guilty. After this past year our relationship has definitely improved and we don't just silently stare at one another with awkward silence. Where are we going this time? Haku asked. We're going to a place where the Kagaya clan used to be, then we'll leave Kurigakure. I replied. Kagaya clan? What kind of clan is it? It was a brutal clan that believed in killing each other to become stronger. Hey, why are we going there, big bro? Wouldn't it be pretty dangerous then? It'd be safer to leave from another access point. And what do you mean by used to be? Does that mean it's not there anymore? I inwardly smirked. This past year, as our relationship got better, Haku started calling me big bro. We also revealed some secrets to each other, such as what happened to Haku in his past and how he can use the ice release Kekkei Genkei, whilst I told him that I'm not actually blind, but was an experimental subject of Orochimaru and had the Sharingan planted in my eyes, hence the blindfold. We continued our conversation while running side by side through a valley. Remember when we heard that a clan was wiped out recently because it attacked the Hidden Mist village? Haku nodded and replied, yeah, I remember. So that Kagaya clan was the one behind that incident. I nodded. We're going to take a look at the aftermath and see if there's any opportunity to get stronger. If we don't have any fruitful harvests, then we'll leave for the land of fire and search for Konoha, the village hidden in the leaves. I hear they have a stable economy and that it's relatively safer there than the other villages. Haku nodded and said, okay, I'll follow wherever you go, big brother. I sighed inwardly. I can't possibly tell him that I already know there's someone named Kimimaro, who's a kid like him and I, and that the real purpose in us going there is to recruit him. We traveled on for a few more hours before stopping to rest in a well-concealed area. We'll rest here for tonight, I said as I gave the area a quick sweep with my senses. Haku slowly took a glance over the area before saying, okay, how much further do you think we have to go? I gave a thoughtful look before replying, we passed by the main river not too long ago, so a day's travel at most. Haku nodded before taking out a few target practice papers and stuck them to the surrounding trees. He then proceeded to take out some Senbon needles and practiced throwing them to hit their marks. Since we didn't have anyone to properly guide us and since our access to resources were limited, the techniques, skills, and tools we did have were all obtained from our experiences fighting thugs and bandits on the road. I offered my advice every now and then to Haku as I had plenty of combat experience in my previous life. The main difference is having to adapt to the use of chakra, which allows for more versatility and power in battle. I started practicing my tree climbing exercise by gathering chakra at my foot and keeping a stable control of it there to allow me to walk up the tree and hang upside down. When I had first started practicing this technique, it took me multiple trial and errors before getting it right since I didn't have an instructor to guide me. Luckily I'm a sensory type and have the Sharingan, so it helps me see and understand the flow of chakra better than others. While hanging upside down on a tree branch, I started to observe Haku's needle throwing. He's gotten a lot better and more accurate. His accuracy is about 95% and he's only 6 years old. His chakra reserves for a 6-year-old are definitely abnormal. He's definitely a prodigy, but I guess I'm not one to talk since my 6-year-old body also has an abnormal amount of chakra for my age. Well. And factor in that I wasn't even naturally born. I let out a sigh which caught Haku's attention. He stopped throwing his Senbon needle midway and turned his head to look up at me. Is something wrong, big brother? Did I make a mistake in my throwing technique? He asked anxiously. I stared down at him for a moment before jumping down from the tree branch. No, it's not that, I was just thinking about some things. Your technique is good, great in fact. Give yourself another week, maybe less, and you'll be hitting these targets with 100% accuracy. Haku gave a curt nod before continuing on with his practice. As he continued his needle throwing, I began training in my own kunai and shuriken throwing technique. Haku and I are both 6 years old now, and Kimimaro should be the same. Naruto and Sasuke should also be about 6, and they'll start the academy when they turn 7. Please let it be that Orochimaru did not find Kimimaro, I silently prayed to myself as I threw a shuriken with my left hand toward a tree marked with a target hidden behind a few other trees. Before it could hit its mark, one threw the 2 shuriken in my right hand with extreme force to a tree on my right. This made sure that the right shuriken hit its mark first before the second right shuriken bounced off the first one and ricocheted at an angle where it hit the shuriken I threw with my left hand, causing it to change direction at the right moment to meet its hidden target. I nodded in satisfaction with my shuriken training as Haku watched with a look of admiration. He silently looked down at the Senbon needles in his own hand before throwing a couple needles in separate directions and jumping in the air, throwing more needles to redirect the first batch at a precise angle, causing them to veer towards hidden target marks. TCH. All 5 needles had hit their marks with perfect accuracy. Haku landed on the ground soon after and gave me a smile. I turned and stared at him with a curious gaze before saying, "Did I say a week? Forget it. I acknowledge your Senbon needle throwing prowess." We proceeded to train in taijutsu for a while before washing up by the river and getting some sleep. Early next morning we set foot on the road again, and by the time afternoon rolled around, a broken down village came into view. Haku and I slowed our steps and stood before a broken down sign that read, Kagaya Clan. I took a look around and closed my eyes through my blindfold, attempting to sense any living signatures. If I remember correctly, Zabuza and Haku had once come across Kimimaro when they were traveling out of Kurigakure. The Kagaya clan is near the border, so if I can't find him within the clan ruins, he shouldn't be too far away either. Once I find him, we'll take him and leave Kurigakure, given that Orochimaru hasn't already found him first. I turned to Haku and then said, "Haku, you take a look around the clan ruins to see if you can find anything useful, and I'll scout a route up ahead for us to take out of Kurigakure." Haku nodded and said, "Be careful, big brother." He then took off. Evening soon fell. I hope big brother Izaya is okay. It's been a few hours already, Haku thought to himself silently. He had already finished checking the ruins of the clan and found some basic scrolls for taijutsu and chakra control techniques. He paced back and forth, waiting nervously. Did something happen to big brother? What if he was ambushed? No, big brother can take care of himself. Wait. He wouldn't leave me, would he? No, big brother wouldn't do that. Maybe I should go look for him. Just as Haku was about to run after Izaya, he looked up at the road to see 2 silhouettes walking his way. "Hey! Big brother!" Haku exclaimed as he dashed off towards Izaya. "Haku, sorry if I scared you, I didn't mean to be gone for so long." I apologized. "No, it's okay big brother, I knew you wouldn't leave me. It's just that I was doubting myself." I smiled and put a hand on Haku's shoulder as a show of comfort. It was then that Haku noticed the figure next to me. He tilted his head in confusion but immediately felt his heart sting when he met this stranger's eyes. Painful memories resurfaced in him as he recalled a similar gaze he once had himself. He immediately deduced the reason why his big brother was so late, and it was probably because he wanted to help out this stranger just like how he helped him. Haku snapped out of his own thoughts before extending a hand to this stranger and said, "I'm Haku. Yuki Haku. Since you came together with big brother, then from this day forth, you and I will also be family." Kimimaro gave an uncertain glance at Haku's hand before turning towards Izaya, who gave him a nod of assurance. He then took hold of Haku's hand and said, "I'm Kimimaro, the last surviving member of the Kagaya clan." Haku was inwardly shocked at the revelation that this kid in front of him was a member of the Kagaya clan. The clan that he had just raided the ruins of. The clan that his big brother said was savage and barbaric, where they killed each other to grow stronger. He gave an inquisitive glance to Izaya, who simply smiled back and said, "From today onwards, the three of us are more than family. We are sworn brothers. We live together and will always have each other's backs." Haku nodded with a "MN," while Kimimaro seemed to have a new light shine in his eyes. He stared at both Haku and Izaya and silently thought to himself, "I will use my life to protect my sworn brothers. That is my purpose." Chapter 4. Pitter-patter, pitter-patter. The sound of rain continued to fall as a small pot hovered over a fire that lit up a cave with 3 children huddled around it. They continued to eat out of wooden bowls with wooden spoons. These 3 were exactly Karasuma Izaya, Yuki Haku, and Kagaya Kimimaro. Izaya sat down staring at the flames of the fire, going through the motions of dipping his spoon into the soup and bringing it to his mouth for a taste as he basked in the comfortable silence of the cave. The only sounds that could be heard was the constant falling of rain outside the cave, the occasional firewood breaking apart from the heat of the flame, and the sounds of slurping made from the 3 kids eating soup. After months and months of weary traveling, we had finally made it past the valley lands and into the Land of Fire country's territory. We had to take some detours and roundabout ways to avoid unnecessary attention and potentially life-threatening situations. It'll probably take us another month before reaching Konoha. By the time we get there, I reckon Naruto and Sasuke would have already enrolled into the academy. The hard part is that we'll definitely be detected by Konoha's barrier and be restrained. In order to resolve things smoothly, I need to convince the 3rd Hokage of letting us stay in Konoha. Thankfully, his personality should be of a very understanding and amiable old grandpa, but there's no telling if they'd even let us speak face to face with Lord Third. I inwardly sighed and looked down at my bowl of soup and mused to myself at how we ended up getting it. Flashback to 2 days ago. Kimimaro, Haku and I continued to travel through the valley lands and headed towards the border near Fire Country when I sensed something amiss. Since I'm a sensory-type ninja, my senses were more keen than others. I slowed down my pace, eventually stopping near a cliff of the valley. "What's wrong, big brother?" Haku asked. Kimimaro silently waited for me to answer. I turned to look at them and said, "I sensed something off. A mile from here there seems to be about a dozen people stopped in their tracks. It looks like 2 guys are at the forefront obstructing their way." It was then at that moment that an epiphany hit me. Surprisingly, I recognized these 2 chakra signatures. They definitely belonged to the 2 bandits with that guy the first killed named Kanwai. I believe their names were Jugo and Sen. I inwardly sneered. I think there are 2 bandits trying to rob a roaming merchant caravan. Kimimaro narrowed his eyes and said, "Don't worry, I'll do everything I can to protect you both." Haku then turned to him with a soft smile and said, "No, we will protect each other." I nodded. "Let's first get a closer look. They're in the valley down below whilst we're up on higher ground, so we have an advantage. We'll wait for an opportunity and track them down. When they let their guard down, I'll cast a genjutsu on them. Kimimaro, you take them out with your taijutsu, Haku you provide support." "Okay." Haku and Kimimaro assented. We approached the scene of robbery in time to see the merchants give in to the bandits. They willfully gave away some of their food rations, equipment, and money before the 2 bandits left. I carefully tracked their movements through my sensory perception while we followed suit, being careful not to get too close so as not to expose our presence. After 15 minutes of playing follow the leader, they finally stopped in a secluded area surrounded by rocks and tall cliffs. "Ha ha ha, did you see the looks on their faces?" cackled Jugo. Sen grinned while holding a hefty bag of coins in his hands. "It's unfortunate that Kanwai can't enjoy our fortune with us. I swear I'll kill the bastard that robbed us and killed Kanwai," Sen remarked with a scowl. "Haha, I'll be the first to shred that bastard's guts to ribbons." Jugo laughed. He continued to laugh and was about to unpack his haul when he noticed something off. A small and gentle breeze swept by, kicking up the dust on the ground upwards before dissipating. He turned to talk to Sen and said, "Oi, Sen, does something seem?" Just as he was about to finish his sentence, he noticed Sen fall to the ground dead and a figure standing in front of the corpse. It was Kanwai. Jugo suddenly felt alarmed. What? Kanwai. Impossible. Why, you're dead. You can't be here. In a similar fashion, Sen seemed to be seeing the same thing, however in his mind it was Jugo who was killed by Kanwai. Izaya turned to both Kimimaro and Haku. "Alright, genjutsu done. Let's take care of these guys." "Wow, big brother, your demonic illusion hell viewing jutsu is really effective. They look like they've gone crazy," Haku remarked. Kimimaro nodded and added, "That's not all, Izaya even made it so in their vision they see each other as the enemy. If they don't snap out of it, they'll most likely end up drawing their weapon against each other." "Hey," I sneered. "Those two bandits deserve it. They probably did even worse things than their dead comrade Kanwai. I made it so they think that the other person is Kanwai who killed the remaining member of their bandit team." We all came out of our hiding spots and just about to take action when the two bandits took out their kunais and ran towards each other. Just before they were about to clash, they stopped, snapping out of the genjutsu. "Crap, they broke out of the genjutsu," I exclaimed. Before we could retreat, Sen and Jugo came to a realization that they'd been duped and noticed our presence. "Fuck. It's just 3 kids. I'll fucking tear them to ribbons," Jugo angrily shouted as he dashed over. Sen was about to say something when Haku quickly threw 2 senbon needles at him. He quickly wielded the kunai in his hand to deflect one while dodging to the left to avoid being hit by the other. Sen was inwardly alarmed. He was the more level-headed out of the two, and he immediately noticed that if the genjutsu casted on them were done by these 3 brats, then they couldn't be underestimated no matter how young they looked. The 2 needles thrown at him were done with pinpoint accuracy and were aimed at vital spots that could have caused him serious damage had he not reacted in time. Before he could warn Jugo of the situation they were in, Haku charged forth with more needles in hand, expertly throwing and keeping him on the defensive. Kimimaro charged forward to meet Jugo head-on in a frontal confrontation of taijutsu. As Kimimaro charged forward, a large bone protruded out of his left shoulder which he pulled out with his right hand and molded it into a sword. "Dance of Camellia," he said. Jugo finally had a look of alarm as he clashed again. Against Kimimaro. What the hell kind of jutsu is that? He pulled a bone out of his body and used it as a weapon. Jugo pulled out a second kunai and slashed towards Kimimaro's forehead, who expertly blocked it with his bone sword. He then counterattacked by stabbing towards Jugo's chest. Jugo jumped back and sidestepped. With a reverse grip on his kunai, he spun and aimed once more at Kimimaro's head. Before the kunai could connect, Izaya threw 2 shuriken at him and activated the Shadow Shuriken Jutsu. Jugo quickly stopped his attack midway and used his kunai to block the incoming shuriken. Kimimaro took this opportunity to stab at Jugo's chest. He quickly used his second kunai to parry Kimimaro's attack, but what he failed to notice was the second shuriken hiding beneath the first one's shadow. This all happened in a flash, and before he realized it, he was pierced in the chest by a shuriken. This caused him to panic slightly, which lowered his awareness of the battle. Using this opportunity, Izaya activated the Earth-style headhunter jutsu and pulled Jugo's entire body into the ground, leaving only his head exposed. Kimimaro didn't waste a second of this chance and stabbed the bone sword into Jugo's head, effectively killing him. Sen was greatly alarmed. This all happened so fast that he never had a chance to rush in to help. He knew he had to escape or he'd lose his life here and now to 3 kids. He quickly parried 3 more needles and threw down a smoke bomb before utilizing the body flicker jutsu to escape in the distance. Izaya quickly sensed the direction he disappeared in and also activated the body flicker jutsu to follow. Just as Sen thought he was safe, he felt a dangerous sensation behind him, causing him to react involuntarily and rolled to the side, forcing him to stop running. Just as he did so, a kunai stuck to the ground where it would have been him. He looked up to see a kid with snow-white hair and a black blindfold on in front of him. Shit, he inwardly cursed. The hell is with these kids? They some sort of monsters or what? Without saying much else, he quickly weaved the hand signs for the water-style gunshot jutsu. He took a deep breath and built up chakra in his mouth before releasing it as a powerful water ball with a strong force behind it. At the same time, Izaya quickly jumped back and with incredible speed he formed the hand seals of snake, ram, monkey, boar, horse, and tiger. Fire-style flame bullet jutsu. A powerful gush of fire spewed outwards from Izaya's lips as the hot fiery flames and the cool watery blast came into contact. A huge white cloud of steam filled the area with a hiss sound as both techniques cancelled each other out. Sen panicked. What the hell? This kid is a freak. He has enough chakra to use AC rank fire-style jutsu. Before he could collect his thoughts further, Haku and Kimimaro caught up. 2 Senbon needles flew straight at him, which he parried one but failed to dodge the other as it stabbed into a ligament in his leg, causing him to stumble and fall. Just as he pulled out the needle and got back up, Kimimaro activated his jutsu, Dance of the Honey Locust Spear. A large, thin, sharp, and narrow bone protruded from under his right arm and flew out at an incredible speed that pierced Sen's chest, which then pinned him to the ground. Blood spurted out from his mouth and oozed from his chest as he lay there in disbelief. The steam from earlier finally dissipated, revealing 3 kids that stood before Sen's dying form. Sen struggled to keep his eyes open and looked up at his killers. For the first time since their encounter, he finally had a good chance to look at them. He mentally took note of them. Fuck. They really are just 3 kids. One of them looks as pretty as a girl. Another a freak with bones sticking out his body. And one kid that's even blind. Izaya walked forward a bit before saying, "Any last words?" Sen just looked on coldly before laughing. Hey h ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. He died laughing because he couldn't understand how these 3 weird-looking kids were the ones he ended up losing his life to. End of flashback. Well, we ended up killing those 2 bandits and raided their temporary hideout in the valley and ended up getting a pretty decent haul, so we secretly returned the stolen goods they robbed from the merchant caravan. Izaya put his bowl to his lips and emptied the last bits of soup into his stomach before standing up and walking towards the cave entrance. He washed his bowl with the help of rainwater and packed it away before sitting back down by the warm fire. At this point, Kimimaro and Haku had finished as well. Now that we're in fire country, do you know how long until we reach Konoha? Haku inquired. As long as nothing surprising happens, we should get there within a month. I replied. Kimimaro silently cleaned up the pot before taking out a scroll to study. What's that? Haku asked as he looked over curiously. It's a scroll containing some taijutsu movements. I want to make sure I learn as much as I can so I can get stronger. That way I can protect you both without any worries. Haku's facial expression softened. Don't worry, Brother Maro, I will get a lot stronger too, so you and Big Brother don't have to work as hard. Ha ha ha. I laughed bemused and walked over to Kimimaro's side. I'm glad Haku is able to be so amiable around us. He's even taken up giving Kimimaro a nickname like Maro while he still calls me Big Brother. After looking through the taijutsu scroll, the three of us sat in a meditative state, internally practicing and simulating techniques and abilities in our minds. In a way, it was a form of cultivation to better understand how to use and control chakra. We continued this for a few hours, taking turns on nightwatch duty. For the next month, this was what our life consisted of: eating, traveling, training, sleeping. We continued to hone our skills and develop our areas of expertise. For Haku, it was developing his ice-style Kekkei Genkai and getting a better control of his chakra output when using water jutsu. For Kimimaro, it was developing his taijutsu skills and getting a better control over his own dead bone pulse Kekkei Genkai. As for me, I sifted through the memories of my past life and used my knowledge of the Naruto world to pick a jutsu that I personally wanted to train in and develop. I instantly decided on the Flying Thunder God Jutsu. Not only would this jutsu be extremely deadly if used correctly, but it would also serve as the most powerful life-saving measure in a life-threatening situation. Other than practicing the seals for the Flying Thunder God technique, I worked on training my Sharingan and Mangekyo Sharingan abilities. After probing and testing out my Mangekyo Sharingan a few times, I discerned what abilities I had awakened. In my right eye I had awakened the Amaterasu ability, and in my left eye I had awakened an ability called Kuninoto Kodachi. With Amaterasu I could summon forth blazing black flames that burn until my target is destroyed, and with Kuninoto Kodachi I could distort the shape and size of any object within my field of vision, including ninjutsu. I was surprised that I awakened an ability that wasn't mentioned in my memories of the Naruto world I had in my previous life, so it seems I'll just have to test out its full capabilities through trial and error. Through training I discovered that in my current body, 2 shots of small-scale Amaterasu was enough to drain my chakra to near zero, whereas utilizing Kuninoto Kodachi drains my chakra at various degrees depending on how distorted I want to change something. If I wanted to distort an object to become much larger or much smaller than it already is, then it drains a lot more chakra, and obviously the less changes I make, the less chakra it drains. I also discovered that changing the size doesn't reduce the potency of the object. For instance, I tried reducing Haku's water-style gunshot jutsu by 75% its size, but the power behind the attack was just as strong. Only it was more concentrated. In fact, I dare say making it smaller caused it to become even more deadly and gave it incredible penetrative power that it didn't have before. I should probably refrain from using the powers of my Mangekyo Sharingan in front of people until I become strong enough to fend for myself. It also takes too much chakra to use these techniques for the time being. If 2 shots of small-scale Amaterasu are my limit, then that equates to about 4 to 5 shots of C-rank ninjutsu. For my current age and body, I'd say that's pretty good considering genin aren't supposed to have enough chakra even for the C-rank fireball jutsu. For now I'll work on developing my Flying Thunder God jutsu. Even though it's a S-rank jutsu, the drain on my chakra isn't much due to it being proportional to the size of the object being teleported. What makes it S-rank is the potential lethality of the technique and the complicated knowledge one has to have of the sealing technique, as well as creating the formation of a space-time network that connects to the sealing formula. Then one has to be able to execute the technique by connecting the object through either their seal or chakra to the space-time network that allows for instant teleportation. I like the design of the 4th Hokage's Flying Thunder God Kunai. If we get accepted into the Leaf Village, I'll see if there's a way to manufacture my own. For now I'll stick to inscribing my Flying Thunder God seal onto these blank paper tags that I have and attach them to regular kunai. Day, night, weeks continued to pass by until finally. I let out a large breath. Kimimaro and Haku also let out a breath of relief as they stood beside me. Finally, we made it. It took about 41 days. A bit longer than expected, but we're finally here. I let out. Haku nodded. Since we're here, if we go any closer we'll be detected by Konoha's barrier. Kimimaro assented. Right. How should we approach? Well, I think honesty is going to be the best option for us. First off, we're just 3 kids about age 7. Secondly, we haven't done anything to incite Konoha's ire. Thirdly, if we attempt to do anything suspicious like sneaking around and get caught, it'd end up causing more confusion and chaos. Since we want to join of our own free will anyways and haven't done anything against Konoha, we should politely turn ourselves in and just explain the situation to them. I heard the third Hokage is very amiable and understanding. He may be suspicious at first, but I reckon he won't just leave 3 kids alone with nowhere to go, especially if they come knocking on his front doorstep asking for help and shelter. You both can leave the talking to me. Kimimaro and Haku nodded. I gave them both a look of assurance. Then let's go. Chapter 5. Puff. A plume of white smoke filled the air as the third Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, smoked his pipe. He flipped over some paperwork while relishing the taste of tobacco in his mouth. Knock, knock. Enter. He said with a deep and old voice as he gently placed the paperwork to the side and straightened his back in his chair awaiting his guest. From the other side of the door was heard a cough. Ahem. Excuse me for disturbing you, Lord Hokage. The door to the Hokage's room opened to reveal a Jonin, Katetsu Hagane, one of the guards to the entrance of Konoha. Oh, Katetsu, what brings you here? Hiruzen asked. As Katetsu walked inside, Kimimaro, Haku, and myself followed suit. As it turns out, even though we were a bit nervous as to how things would go down, aside from the Konoha guards being a bit wary and asking a lot of questions, they ended up humoring our request and took us to see the third Hokage. Hiruzen gave a surprised look as he saw the 3 unfamiliar children walk in behind Katetsu. Katetsu cleared his throat before explaining the situation to the third Hokage. Lord Third, these 3 children claim that they fled from the country of water. They claim that they aren't affiliated with the village hidden in the mist. Katetsu said. Hiruzen had a pensive look on his face before speaking. Even if they claim they are not affiliated with the village hidden in the mist, it can't be denied that they were born in the country of water, therefore, they are rightful citizens of that country. Katetsu gave a sheepish look and rubbed the back of his neck before Hiruzen continued on. Ha ha ha, alright, I don't want to make things difficult. Children, why don't you tell me your names? Why have you come so far to Konoha? Hiruzen asked amiably. He then gave another puff of smoke from his pipe. The 3 of us looked at each other before I stepped up to speak. Greetings, Lord Hokage, my name is Izaya. Karasuma Izaya. These 2 are my sworn brothers, Yuki Haku and Kagaya Kimimaro. Oh. Hiruzen let out a surprised remark and also a look of deep contemplation. He stroked his beard as he spoke. Yuki. I recall there was a famous Yuki clan in the Land of Water, however, I heard their clan was wiped out after the Kekkei Genkei War a while back. And Kagaya. I was certain that I received news regarding the Kagaya clan. It waged war against the village hidden in the mist and they were exterminated not long ago. Forgive me, but I've not heard of the Karasuma clan or tribe. Both Haku and Kimimaro flinched inwardly, having their past brought up. Hiruzen seemed to notice this, which inwardly confirmed his suspicion that these 2 were indeed of the famous Yuki and Kagaya clan he mentioned. He softened his expression after realizing that these 2 children in front of him were probably the last of their clan. Ahem. My apologies for bringing up such a dark part of history. It seems from your reaction that you both are surviving members of the Yuki and Kagaya clan. I'm sorry children such as yourselves had to go through something as terrible as a war like that. He then turned his attention towards me. You said your name is Karasuma Izaya, correct? I see that the 3 of you indeed have very close ties together, and it appears that you are able to speak for both of your companions. Would you mind telling me why the 3 of you have come all this way? I turned my head at the Jonin, Katetsu, who brought us in before turning back to face the third Hokage. I must first apologize, Lord Third Hokage. Before I answer you, might I be so bold